today are John McCann, the director of the Institute, and 3 alumni. We have Jose Ochoa, executive and artistic director of the Chicago High School for the Arts, Magda Martinez, director of programs at Fleischer Art Memorial, and Sue Elliott, director of education at Seattle Opera. We're also joined today by James Horton, director of learning and digital media here at the Guild, who will be helping to answer some of your questions throughout the call, as well as the rest of the group. The goals of today's orientation are to brief you on the CAELI experience and how CAELI is designed, what learning outcomes are designed for participants. We're going to talk a little bit about the components of the program, what makes for a compelling application. The application process is competitive, and so we want to talk you through some characteristics of a compelling application. And then this is also an opportunity for you to hear directly from 3 illustrious alumni about their experience and its impact on them personally and professionally. Before we begin, let me mention that a recording of this webinar will be posted on the Guild's website. That's nationalguild.org, and you can look for that recording by the end of the week, although we may have it up as soon as tomorrow. And also to remind you that today's orientation is scheduled to last 1 hour, so that we do have time for questions. Due to the large number of participants today, we're delighted by all of your interest, but we have chosen to mute the lines. So to ask a question, please send it to us via the question bar, which you will find in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. We will be pausing midway through today's webinar to respond, and again at the end if need be. Before we begin, we'd like to also take a quick minute to ask you 2 quick questions. So we're going to launch a quick little poll here. And the first question is to please tell us a little bit about the role that you play at your organization. What best describes your role in the organization? You'll see a few choices up there. If you could select the one that best describes you. And James, let's go ahead and see the results of that. Great. Wonderful. Thank you. That's very helpful. And then second, we'd like to know if you have an opportunity to, if you've had an opportunity to speak about CAELI with 1 or more of our 125 alumni prior to this orientation webinar. And James, let's go ahead and see. Great. Well, it's lovely to see that some of you have reached out, and for those of you who haven't, this is a great opportunity to hear from 3 of our great alumni today. Thanks, everyone. John, before we begin, let me just say a few quick words about why CAELI is so important to the National Guild and to our field, and what we hope will happen for those who participate. Several years ago, we conducted a needs assessment and learned that fewer than 11% of executives at our member institutions had received any sort of leadership training. As I think most of us participating in today's orientation understand, leading a nonprofit arts education organization with all its many moving parts and many constituencies, our students, our staff, faculty, trustees, not to mention our partners and other stakeholders, is complex. So bringing all of these people together, people who sometimes have many competing agendas, to move things forward around a common agenda is a very tall order. Yet this is what arts education leaders must be able to do if our field is to successfully achieve our mission of ensuring that quality, lifelong learning opportunities in the arts are accessible to all Americans. So we have invested heavily in CAELI in order to help leaders, emerging or otherwise, succeed in this most important endeavor. And so we're absolutely delighted that so many of you are able to join us today, and we hope that this conversation is useful to you in your decision to apply. John, let me turn things over to you.
Thank you very much, Heather. Hello, everybody. It's really, really terrific to have so many of you join us today. And it's especially fun for me because, speaking quite personally, this program is by far my most rewarding experience every year. I look forward to the summertime, the beauty of the Bryn Mawr campus where we get to spend our time together, and Sometimes people refer to that as a 5-day period of restful intensity. So it's something that I just personally look forward to, and I'm so happy each year to get to participate in. To speak about CAELI's objective and the design, it's based on one really fundamental premise, that leadership, as Heather referred to earlier, is not so much a position, but moreover, it's about ways of working that can and should be practiced by folks across their organization, whether they be executive or artistic directors, whether they be program managers, department heads, board members, teachers, or artists. That leadership is really about a way of working within our organization and, by extension, within our field. And we define leadership quite simply. Leadership, as we define it, is behaving in ways that bring people together to move things forward. So in this program called CAELI, the first step in advancing toward this way of working is an opportunity for you to take stock of your own work and for you to hear from others about what you are doing currently that's proving effective and what could be improved upon. And to do this, we use a 360-degree feedback process where during May and June, you'll identify about 10 to 15 folks, some of which might report directly to you, might be your supervisor, a couple of board members, even peers in the field. And over a few weeks, they are asked to complete a short survey about some primary leadership dimensions like communications, decision-making, managing conflict, and the like. And all this is kept completely confidential and just for your use. Then when we gather in July, you receive your individual report, and it provides really, really good guidance on how you can effectively use your 5 days together in a more intentional way. And I might add again that Bryn Mawr is simply beautiful, green, lush, pastoral, and you'll have your own room, one of the cozy and historic dorms, and we work together every day from about 9 to 5. We have some longer evenings that includes time to get together and to get to know the other folks that will be in your class of 25, and also to work with 7 just wondrously committed and helpful guides who serve as our faculty for the week. 4 of these folks, Ronnie and Judy and Mary and Phil, have spent their lives helping people improve their practice of leadership. And the other 3, including Jose, who's on the call with us today, and Robin Walker Murphy, who's Director of Early Childhood and Family Programs at DreamYard Project in the Bronx, and Fiona Chatwin, who's Founder and Executive Director of Via Musica in San Diego, will be joining us. They're your peers, people doing the same kind of good work you're doing, and doing it in ways from which we can all learn a lot. So when you think about the week, don't think about school or seminars. Think about doing stuff, being on your feet, engaging with your peers. And as a couple of participants have said about this experience, one noted, having this time away from my day-to-day life to learn, reflect, and reconnect with my best self has been a godsend at a time when I most needed it. This experience will shape the rest of my life. Another person commented after the program, being in such a beautiful location with such good food and comfortable surroundings reinforced the repeated message to take care of and respect myself. And you leave Bryn Mawr with new friends and allies for life, and also a learning plan which identifies 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 specific areas of your work that you want to focus on. And this learning plan that you leave Bryn Mawr with is your guide to an engagement with your leadership coach. So over the next 5 months, as you put in practice some new ways of working, you'll have 4 sessions with your coach. So when you can discuss progress and challenges and receive helpful counsel, good guidance, and support as you continue your own leadership journey. So with that, just as a backdrop of the 4 key elements of the programs, and by the way, as we go through today, as questions come to your mind, be sure and take the advice that Heather gave us and channel those questions through the webinar, because we want to use our time in a few minutes to be able to respond to those. But now I'd really like to turn to our 3 very, very special alumni guests today and each of them are going to take 5 or 6 minutes just to talk about their own journey through CAELI. And Jose, if we might start with you, it would be just terrific.
Okay, hello everyone. It's great to be on the call and to share my experience with you all. I am Jose Ochoa, and I'm the founding executive and artistic director of Chi Arts, or the Chicago High School for the Arts, obviously in Chicago. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey. I'm also a board member of the National Guild. I've been a board member, I think, 7 years now. So I love the Guild, and it's been an amazing organization for me, the context. And so if you're not familiar with the Guild, I encourage you to get familiar with the Guild, because it's really a wonderful thing. So at Chi Arts, as I mentioned, I'm the founding director. The school started by the arts community of Chicago, the civic and philanthropic community, and the arts community came together to build this art school. We were built to build the diversity of the arts in the city of Chicago. So it's a really special organization for the city, and with that comes a lot of pressures. So we grew very quickly in 5 years. I was the very first employee, and within 4 years we had 160 employees, and we went from 0 students to almost 600 in 4 years. And so the growth of the organization was fast and furious, and as a leader of a new organization, I wanted to step back and assess our past and figure out what our future was going to look like. And so we were a startup organization, and I wanted to transition from being a startup leader to being an executive who could take the organization to new levels of stability. Especially here in Chicago, there's a lot of uncertainty with economies and the city's demographics, and certainly the artistic and educational landscape. So I needed help to figure out how I would navigate and lead my organization through those changes. And so by attending CAELI, I had hoped that I would learn how to lead the organization, and that I would also develop my own personal growth as an executive. I love the work that I do, and I have an extremely dedicated board of directors. It's pretty phenomenal. But there's no room for failure, and my job seems to be a 24-hour job, 7 days a week. And I was pretty burnt out. So I was really looking for something, and CAELI seemed to be the fit. I loved all aspects of CAELI. The program is excellent, and it was really valuable. It's not something that the way the program is put together, it's not something that I could have pieced together on my own. I think it would have been very expensive and just quite complicated to do. Two of the things that John mentioned, or at least one of the things that he mentioned, was the 360-degree feedback. And I know all of us that have participated in CAELI had a lot of anxiety going into CAELI and figuring out what that feedback was going to look like. And I have to say that looking at that feedback, it's something that I look at occasionally throughout the year. I was in the class of 2013, so it's been a couple of years now. And there are things in the feedback that I have to think about quite often. The other thing that was really interesting about the program was the Myers-Briggs analysis. It's something that I really didn't pay attention to, and I thought was okay, it was silly. But the more I think about it, the way I think and all the decisions I make are really based upon my personality. And I realize that a lot of times my personality sometimes gets in the way, or at least the way I think. And sometimes there are strengths, and I need to also learn how to harness those strengths and use them for my advantage. So those things at CAELI were super valuable to me, and they're things that I carry with me today. When I think about what stood out most from the CAELI experience, before going into CAELI, I thought I was a very receptive and very intuitive person. And I realized through the 360 feedback and just through thinking during my week there that when I thought I was listening to others, I really wasn't. And when I thought that everyone was on the same page, we weren't. And when I thought that everyone had the same perspective that I did, not everyone did. And that can be overwhelming, and that can sometimes be hard to swallow. But dealing with that and learning how to address that is very important, and it was something that I did learn at CAELI. I love the relationships that I build at CAELI. That slide there is my class. And whenever I see those faces or hear their names, my heart lights up. We did a lot of laughing. We did some crying. And I was in a bad place when I got to CAELI just because I was so tired and so burnt out. Because of the work I do, I love my work, but it was really taking a toll on me. And when I left CAELI, I certainly felt better about myself, and I felt better about the work I was doing. And I loved CAELI because there was no judgment from others. We were all there to support each other. We all had, not everyone had exactly the same experiences, but we could all certainly relate to each other and share stories and help each other figure out ways to address some of the challenges that each of us were facing. I think that I have built a community of peers through CAELI. Even though there are other people that have participated in CAELI that I haven't met yet, as soon as we meet, we know there's an instant bond because it's a very special experience. I highly recommend it. But I do have to say it's a very personal experience, and it's something that I wasn't necessarily ready for at the time, but I'm certainly glad that I did it. So I think that's all I have to say at this time, and I'm certainly willing to take any questions when we're ready.
Jose, thank you. And as people have the questions, just be sure and submit those, and we'll take those at the end after we hear from our other two special guests. And Jose, from the class of 2013, and Sue, I think you were with us last year in 2014, right?
I sure was, John. Thank you so much. I'm the Director of Education here at Seattle Opera, and I've been in this position for the past 4.5 years. But I'm actually in my last week of service here in Seattle. I'm headed to the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto to take a new position as Director of Teacher Certification. When I arrived at Seattle Opera, we had a very small but mighty team of educators, and that was in 2010. And the reason I applied for CAELI is that in 2014, Seattle Opera's General Director, which is the equivalent of a CEO in the opera world, retired after 31 years at the helm here. And I would say that most of my colleague directors had also worked here for decades. So it was a very big leadership transition. And with any transition comes, of course, the new leader. And his vision included supporting a planned expansion of education programs. We'd served about 20,000 people each season for decades, and we'd put in place a plan about 3 years ago to expand that to more than 200,000 people each season. So I have that in common with Jose, that rapid, aggressive expansion effort. And in a company where the big focus is really on main stage performances, I knew it would be very important for me to become the best advocate and leader I could in order to make this expansion happen. And I knew I needed help. So along comes CAELI information into my email box, and I apply. And once I was accepted, I thought, well, you know, it's going to be a little bit like a mini MBA with business strategies and talking about data and maybe highly theoretical. And I have to say that what I encountered was very different, and I'm very grateful that it was different because it turned out to be all about me. And it's so easy, I think, in the work that we do, especially in education, to constantly, to really set your identity by service that you give others. And so that chance to really focus on me, and John, as you said from somebody else's really, really eloquent quote, to focus on my best self, I thought that that was truly the essential strength of this program. What made it worthwhile for me definitely the nature of the approach, that it's very personalized. It met me where I was in my own leadership learning journey, and that was very different than many others in my cohort that included 24 other fantastic individuals. Also, the strength of the faculty. Even the faculty are very, very different people with different skill sets and personality types and work experiences. And for me, that was so valuable. And there were faculty that I thought, after having read their bios before coming, that I would really connect with, and I absolutely did. And there were others I might not have been so keen on their area of expertise. But it really turned out that everybody was so valuable, and that's partly because of John and his team at Partners in Performance and how they plan all of this. I would say another worthwhile thing is that the majority of the faculty are on site the whole time and in all of the sessions, and so it really becomes a big team. Another value for me is the strength of the cohort. I think of them as my new secret army. They're wildly and beautifully diverse, very supportive, and we're lucky we remain quite connected through a private Facebook group that I created so that it's just the people in our cohort, and we feel very safe and in continuing our learning journeys there with each other. A few examples of things that really stood out for me include just the time. This was not a long weekend leadership course. This is a 7-month journey that includes so many different phases, and I think they're well sequenced in terms of getting me to open up to the process and prepare for it. I would say that the on-site at Bryn Mawr is certainly chock full of activity during the day, but there's lots of time in the evenings to ponder, reflect, and sink into the experience at one's own pace. And I did that. You know, several cohort members got together and went into town a few nights, and I just chose to stay with myself and reflecting on those days. What also stood out was some actual instruction about renewal. I, like probably many of you on the call, operate on all cylinders almost all of the time. And trying to figure out how I could build renewal into my practice more than just taking a long weekend away from work, but how can I do that every day? And trying to figure out how I would break it to my bosses and my team here that I didn't want to work 80 to 100-hour weeks any longer. So that was really helpful for me. I think one of the light bulb moments for me that I mentioned in an email that I think was distributed yesterday to many folks was around communication strategies. And when I looked at Phil's rules, Phil was our faculty member for communication, balancing advocacy and inquiry in my conversations, I absolutely did that. It was totally 50-50. But one of my cohort members really let me in on the secret that though it was 50-50, my opening argument at a trial, you know, was well practiced because I sounded like a lawyer when I just established all the positions. And so that cognitive dissonance of thinking that I was following really good practices and finding out that not for everyone were those practices helpful. And for me, also the capstone I negotiated with my company, who I'm grateful paid for me to attend the National Guild Conference in November following as part of the CAELI experience, and being able to connect with not only members of my cohort, but members of previous classes from CAELI has been really, really helpful. A couple of specific examples about usefulness and value. Certainly taking all of the tools that and instruments that we work with during the Bryn Mawr on-site, that's the 360 feedback, the Myers-Briggs tests, the work around core and practicing values. There's a lot of information that comes in that period at Bryn Mawr. And so luckily, John and his folks have built in executive coaching following that time in which you can take all of those tools and really put them together in a plan and test things out over the next 4 months. So you still have professional support in your experimentation. And I would say also what's been very useful for me, the lessons from CAELI have helped me do my best to repair some difficult situations here in Seattle, settle on an exit strategy from my position here, and create the smoothest transition I possibly could have out of Seattle Opera and into the Royal Conservatory. I'm headed into a very different role in a very different organization, and I'm feeling more ready than I know I would have without all of the wonderful lessons at CAELI.
Well, Sue, thank you very much. Great stuff. And let's get to the questions in a second. But first, Magda, it seems like only a few months ago, but it was actually in 2010, the first year of CAELI, when you joined us, and you and I have gotten to do some other things together since then. But just chat with us about being a part of this group maybe during 2010 and any of the experiences since then that have really been influenced by your work with the program.
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Magda Martinez. I'm Director of Programs at a place called the Fleischer Art Memorial in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So when I attended CAELI a long, long time ago, I actually was a year into the position that I presently hold, and I'm also the sort of inaugural holder of this position. So like the other participants, I didn't think of it till now, this organization was also in a period of transition. So the executive director, who had been executive director for 33 years, had just transitioned out. There was a new leader, Matt Braun, and I had been in this position for a year. We had had some major internal restructuring. So what had been 3 siloed programmatic areas for adults, for children, and an exhibitions program became part of what people refer to as my portfolio. So I became the person who was really directing all of our public programs and helping a leadership team think through strategic planning and actually the next step in the evolution of the organization. So there were rapid changes and a rapid shift in the focus as well as we went back to the founder's initial writings and his thinking around what his intentions really were for the institution, which meant we were also looking at our mission and our programs to see if they were in alignment. So that's a little about where that was, where the institution was and where I was. I was also in a place where other people had started referring to me as a leader. And I didn't know if I felt comfortable with that mantle because I had a very strong preconceived notion of how people were supposed to act when they were leaders. And I didn't feel that I fit that mold. So I actually didn't refer to myself as a leader. Truth be told, I still have a little difficulty saying it, owning it, but I'm much better now. So I felt like I didn't fit this traditional idea of leader, someone with all the answers, someone who was a take charge, move it along kind of gal. By nature, I'm a person who asks a lot of questions. I like to understand context, and I felt like sometimes that was interpreted by others as indecisiveness or an inability to make a decision. And so I think participating in CAELI was really incredibly important for me at that point in time. It was really wonderful to go there, and actually I believe Judy Brown was one of the facilitators, and to actually meet another poet, which is how I identify as an artist. And so it was really great to actually have her to talk through some of my qualms and insecurities with in terms of artistic practice and how that lends itself to leadership or doesn't lend itself to leadership. And that was really just so, it was really important in building my confidence and in allowing me to accept that I could craft my identity as a leader, that I did exercise free will in shaping how I wanted to be a leader and how I wanted to lead others. And that was really important at CAELI. There was time to reflect on that. There was also time to acquire techniques. So I have some natural tendencies. I love to listen to people. I am comfortable speaking in public. I have a lot of curiosity about the world around me, so I tend to ask questions a lot. I like working in groups with others. You know, just found out that I'm an existential learner, which means I like big questions, and that's how I learn, and that's how I make sense of the world. And I think I felt those things when I attended CAELI, and it gave me the ability to figure out, okay, how do these strengths that I have, which others saw in me because it came through in the 360 that we did, how could I use that and build my idea of leadership around my strengths, and then work on those things where I was not as strong, like answering people in a timely fashion, right? I like to think, so I have to balance that with doing. And I also think it built a network. Other people have mentioned this. The other people in your cohort become important to you. It's 5 years now. We communicated quite a bit in the first year, year and a half. Like other relationships, there are some people you're just naturally closer to and you continue the relationship with them. And those are really important, especially in times of stress and or transition. And I feel like what I was able to take from that was also this idea that how the work is done, whatever your work is of equal importance, is equally as important as getting the work done, right? And I think for me, as someone who is responsible for others, that was both important, necessary, and actually a great comfort to hear and to understand. And so I still use my journal. So in terms of 5 years out, I still have a journal. I used up the one that you guys were kind enough to give us when we were there at CAELI. And I actually turn to that journal quite often to write when I'm thinking, trying to untangle a ball of yarn that I find myself in on any given day. I reread it to remind myself what I have said is important about my work, about taking care of myself and taking care of others. When I do that, I refer to do you guys still use the ladder of inference?
Oh, yes, yes.
I still refer to that ladder of inference all the time, both in my work and actually in my personal life. And I still think about the example of the box with, oh, I shouldn't say what's in the box, should I? But the box and 3 people looking inside the box at 3 different levels and attempting to decide what's inside of that box. So I think that the 360 was really important. The ability to think about what leadership meant to me was incredibly important. The ability to actually, for me, to learn to respect some natural tendencies that I had and some natural abilities that I had in order to be a good leader were all important to me. So I'm just going to read something to wrap up, actually from my journal. And this is from my 2nd day after CAELI. So this is my 2nd day back after my training, and I'm thinking about how to hold on to my core again, how to remember the place of giving and deeper consciousness of joy. My belief in the human spirit and my desire to create better lives for others, to somehow make a contribution, albeit small, to the betterment of someone's life, has kept me afloat during difficult times. In my daily life, I try to remember the following. The energy you send out will come back to you. The knowledge you have cannot be lost when shared with others. Be respectful of others' time and schedule. Ask for what you need. Trust, and be a beginner again. Thanks.
Wow, Magda, thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks to the 3 of you, to Jose and to Sue as well. And it was very interesting in listening to the 3 of you chat as we segue into the questions that people on the webinar have. Jose, you talked about this being a very personal experience. Sue, you commented on this was all about me and my best self. And then Magda, you talked about crafting my own identity as a leader. So when people speak about this program the way you have consistently about it being about the individual, I wonder if you could, maybe any of the 3 of you, to speak about how maybe different that is from other experiences you've had, how surprising that might have been, because some people have, management training or leadership training as something you go get the 10 things you need to know to be successful or what have you. But each of you spoke with great, I think, directness and great clarity about it being a personal experience, being about your best self, and being about your own identity as the leader. So I just wonder, in the world that you inhabit in your own professions and in your careers, how unique you found that approach to a development program.
John, this is Sue. I'll step into that. It was
Yeah,
completely unique. I've done other leadership institutes and programs, and in most of them, I'm hearing from leaders in my own field. And that can be very valuable, but again, it's mostly about their experiences, and you can learn by watching and seeing what they're modeling. But I think the chance to really dig deep and figure out what I can do based on me was absolutely unique. And since all three of us talked about it, and I know we're not alone among CAELI graduates in feeling that way, I absolutely think that's a very consistent essence of the program.
This is Jose. If I can add to that, I think, again, we were in the room with other arts education leaders, and so we understand what that means and how our field is different from other industries. So there weren't necessarily bankers in the room or attorneys. It was something very unique, and I think for us, arts education is a very personal path and career. And so some of the things that we did, a lot of the activities, helped us think about the way we think and the way we see the world, and the decisions we make reflect that. So it's a very personal experience. I think it was a very personal experience for all of us, because it wasn't just about following these rules 1 through 10, like Sean said, and then you'll figure out the answer. It's a lot deeper than that. And so sometimes we kind of make messes for ourselves. And sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, we get in our own way. And then there are times that we don't really use the gifts and talents that we have, some of the things that Magda talked about. And so it kind of helped us unearth a lot of those things. And I don't think that's a very common type of program that you would see in a more general type of leadership program.
Yeah, I agree. I've been to a lot of leadership programs, and I think often what you're introduced to are the mechanics of what people believe leadership requires, right? So how to put together a budget, HR stuff, board management, and so I think this shifted the focus and allowed so that to me is transactional, I guess is what I'm saying. The transactions are often focused on. And CAELI was a lot more about relational. How are you interacting with others in order to hear what they're saying, have them influence the work, feel like they're not just doing the work, but are actually helping to craft that work, which is relational. And so for me, that was the big difference. And it was actually a really welcome difference.
Good, good. Thank you, each of the three of you. Jose, a question for you that came in just as you were speaking, actually. I had mentioned in my setup that some of the participants, I think it was back during the 011 class, had talked about the restful intensity of the experience when people are on site at Bryn Mawr. So let me just read this question literally, Jose, and maybe you'll have a remark or a comment. It says, "Hi, Jose. Can you speak to the idea of restful intensity? How do you believe CAELI helped transform your feelings of burnout?" So thoughts about the actual ways in which being a part of the group, being a part of the experience, really did respond to what you mentioned in your presentation and your story about being at a period of real burnout when you joined the program.
Sure. Like I mentioned, I had been at the time at my job for 5 years. I had hired our principal of the school, so the two of us had been there for 5 years, and both of us were sort of in the same place, sort of at this place of burnout. I was able to go to CAELI, and just my travels getting to CAELI that day were pretty horrific. My flight was canceled, and then my taxi dropped me off a mile away from campus, and I had to like walk with my luggage. And when I got to the campus, I was a mess. I was a mess, and the instructors and everyone sort of took care of me for the rest of the week. And in my job and in my family, I take care of everyone else. And it really allowed me to think about me. I never get to think about me. And I have to be very quick at figuring out questions and figuring out answers, and I don't have time to reflect. Well, that's the thing, is there is time to reflect. I wasn't making time to reflect. So I think just allowing us to have a place to think, giving us tools to think about. And then, yeah, the question, I think, was it a feeling of sense of belonging and community that helped turn that around for you? That wasn't all of it, but that certainly was a lot. Like I mentioned before, we laughed. There's a picture of me with some of my friends. This was actually a sort of a social hour, and we had a blast. I hadn't laughed in a very long time, and it was really helpful for us to just have that time for ourselves and not be responding to emails and texting and answering calls and figuring out everyone else's problems. It was really about me. I'm sad to say that the principal of my school, who I love dearly, didn't get that opportunity, and so she left and is now in New York. And I hate that she didn't have an opportunity to sort of relight her fire the way I did. I'm actually going to see her in a couple of days, and we still are in touch. But it was a really special thing for me. So yes, the community was a big part of it, but just having time to myself and put me first was the big thing that turned things around for me.
Oh, terrific. I wonder if I might just follow on to that. You mentioned reflection in your response. And then another question that we came in that was directed, ironically, to Sue and to Magda. And the question is, you both mentioned the importance of self-reflection. How did CAELI help you become more introspective? And for instance, I think you mentioned journaling, Magda, as something that you continue to do. You've filled all the pages in the journal that was a part of your CAELI experience and extended that into your current work. But I wonder just briefly if Sue and Magda, you might just comment on how CAELI helped you become more introspective, self-reflective.
This is Sue. I'll start off. Ronnie Brooks and Judy Brown are the two faculty members that really help guide this work during the on-site session in Bryn Mawr. And what they offer are a wide variety of strategies to figure out how you can do this for your own self. And what they share, what has worked for them, what has worked for other people, and then they give you a chance to practice it and try it out there. You can also continue that work with Mary Parrish, the executive coach, over the next 4 months. And I've also been talking a lot with my fellow cohort members about what they're doing to see what's working for them, share what's working for me. And so it has become a part of my daily practice before I get to work in the morning. And I have already seen many benefits.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, John, I use my journal. And I think I use the journal so that I'm not talking to myself in my office out loud, but also so that I can write down questions that might be difficult to ask other people and myself and be able to answer. I think that Sue's absolutely right. There are so many techniques that are offered during the CAELI session. I'll also confess I have a slight tendency that way in my personality already, but I think the way that it's applied to work is the ability to ask questions and not always feel like I have to answer or have an answer ready, at the ready, has really allowed for even that momentary, like, 2-second pause where I can decide if I'm giving an answer or I'm giving a knee-jerk reaction to something, and be able to say, okay, do I and it's really happening very quickly, and maybe it's happening because it's happened for so long now after the CAELI experience, which is, what are we all really trying to get to here? And that's a question I often ask myself when in the midst of discussion.
Well, I think you put this in such fundamental terms, Magda. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea of reflecting on, am I about to give a useful answer, or am I about to share a knee-jerk reaction? And I think the program is designed in ways that allows us to use the kind of material and challenges that you experience throughout the program as a way to develop into a person who can, in real time, reflect on your practice and be able to make those kind of choices. Wait a minute, before I respond, how is it that I will give a useful answer versus a knee-jerk reaction? So this whole idea of reflection is something that has great utility. It's just not sipping wine and writing in your journal, right?
Right, exactly. No, it's not. I mean, I think it is a constant practice, and actually I've offered it to others in their practice who are my colleagues, who I supervise, when they find themselves in difficult positions too, which is practice of asking a question, the practice of, are you answering, do you feel resistance because something is wrong, or do you think you feel resistance because you're frightened by this prospect? So there are real ways to apply all this with the people around you.
Right. Thank you. And we've got other questions, but my goodness, we want to make sure that we have time to talk about the application process. And I just want to respond to one of these just before turning it back to Heather. First of all, just to thank the three of you, Jose and Sue and Magda, for joining us today and hearing your insights and reflections on the program. One of the questions was, what's the time commitment over the course of the 7 months? So just briefly on that, the process of selecting folks that you would want to respond to the 360 and actually completing that instrument yourself, imagine spending what might be cumulative a couple of days over a couple of months to select and communicate with the people that you'd like to invite in as responders, and then to complete the instrument yourself. So a couple of days of preparatory work before arriving at Bryn Mawr that you would do in May and June. And then the 5 days on-site, which is July 21st through the 25th. You arrive on that first day, and we start mid-afternoon, 3 or 4 o'clock, and then we finish up just before midday on the Saturday, so you get home that day. And then the coaching, which begins then in earnest in August or September and would go through November, early December. There are 4 one-hour coaching sessions which you schedule at a time that works for you with your coach over that span of time. So imagine an hour that you would certainly want to prepare for, and those hours occurring every 3, 3.5, or 4 weeks over that period of time, September through November. So that gives you some sense of the time commitment after you've completed your application and know that you're in the program. But with that, Heather, I'd love to turn it back to you because I think we've covered the questions that the time has allowed us for, and I think there's more on the application process.
Great. Thank you, John. And I echo John's thanks to our alumni for their stories, which I think provides a lovely sense of sort of the texture of the experience and what makes it unique. As we may have mentioned in the beginning, this is a competitive application process to really optimize the learning experience and to make it as personal as I think you've heard. We do limit the participation to 25, and there was a question around how many applications we typically get in a year, and I'd say we get around approximately 60 to 70 applications every year. So we are going to talk to you a little bit about how to make the most compelling application. I will also note that you do not have to be an affiliate of a guild member organization to apply to CAELI. However, if you are a member of the guild, you get a significant discount on the tuition. So we can talk to you a little bit more about that certainly after this orientation if you're interested. We do ask that you be in an executive leadership role at a tax-exempt organization within the field of community arts education, or be preparing to move into such a role within the next few years. So, as you could have told by our poll at the beginning, you may be an executive director. We're looking at heads of departments or other key staff with management responsibilities. We do ask that you're willing to commit to all of the Institute activities that John described, as well as the evaluation process that follows the Institute experience, and have the support of your organization. So how can you make the most compelling application? Well, we're really asking you to communicate several things. First, that you understand CAELI's intended leadership development outcomes, and that you really spend some time thinking about your own personal development goals and how the two align. We hope that in your application that you're able to really clearly state what you want to gain from participating in this particular leadership development experience. So as you've heard from our alumni and from John, this is a particular approach to leadership development, and so we ask that you understand that and really align that with where you are in your current role and what you hope to get out of that. We're also looking that for commitment to the field and the impact that you've made in your work thus far. So what does that mean? We're looking for at least a few years, professional years in the field, or perhaps a course of study in a relevant area. And again, as I said, this is designed for folks in executive leadership roles or preparing to move into such a role. We do have, I should say, a range of ages. So we've had people who have participated in this experience that are, newly in leadership roles and new in their careers at sort of younger in years, and we've had people who are veterans in the field. And I think that really speaks to how John and the faculty really think about leadership as a continuous process. And so while you may have been at your job in this career for many years, there's always chance to continue to evolve both personally and professionally. And so I think that's reflected in the applicant pool every year, and it's who we accept. We're also looking for an applicant that demonstrates high potential for leading successfully, so a track record of achievement, and also asking that you demonstrate how your organization will support your participation. So we do ask for a letter of support from your CEO or board chair that really reflects that they understand what will be required of you throughout this process, and that they are fully supportive and behind you in that process. So, for example, will they cover your participation fee? Will they make time for your colleagues to participate in the 360-degree feedback process? And what other ways might they provide support? So that is important for us to understand. And then we're also looking for concrete ways in which you'll share the benefits you derive from CAELI with others. And I think Magda, Sue, and Jose shared some examples of ways that they've been able to do that when they got back to their organization. And again, this particular program is making an investment in you as an individual, and it is a gift in many ways. And we're hoping to really see how you would go back to your organization, but not only your organization, but how might you share what you've learned through this experience with others within the field to really help support and advance the field of community arts education more broadly. So how do you apply? Let's just get into the nitty-gritty here. To start the application, we are asking that you pay a $50 application fee, and there is an application form. Along with that, we ask, and you can find all of this on our website, I should say, which is at nationalguild.org/CAELI, C-A-E-L-I, That's going to bring you to the page where you can, you'll find clear instructions on how to pay your application fee and start the online application form. Then we also ask you to upload a statement of interest. This should be no more than 1 page. And what we're asking is that you really articulate, again, what you hope to gain by participating in CAELI, why participating is important for you, again, at this stage of your career, and how your participation will benefit your organization in the field. We also ask you to upload a resume, please no more than 2 pages. So really, really do ask you to stick to that 2-page maximum. And then again, a letter of recommendation. So this is usually from you know, the executive director, CEO, board chair of your organization, your supporting organization. And we're asking that person to really tell us how he or she knows you, in what capacity and for how long, why he or she feels you would be a good candidate, how your level of, what your level of commitment is to the field, your leadership potential, and how the organization will support your participation. And again, you know, I recommend you sharing some of the materials that we've been able to distribute around CAELI with that person. But I want to also just spend a quick minute on just talking about, in general, how to support your participation, both financially and otherwise. First, on the financial side, the Guild does have some financial aid available. It is need-based financial aid. The application deadline for financial aid is the same as the application deadline for the Institute, and that is April 9th. Your financial aid application should accompany your other CAELI application materials, and there is some information on all of this, again, at nationalguild.org/CAELI. And we're going to consider requests for up to the full cost of the tuition, but in most cases, the award will cover only a portion of your tuition. So we're strongly encouraging you to also pursue other sources of support from your board members, from foundations, from arts councils, etc. So to that end, we have drafted a template letter to get you started, and there's a copy of that template, again, on our website. You can also contact James Horton, who's been answering some of your questions today. He's our Director of Learning and Digital Media, and his email will be on the last slide today, jameshorton@nationalguild.org, and we'll also share his phone number directly, which is 212-268-3337, extension 12, and he's also, you can find them on our website as well. And lastly, I just want to make one note on financial support. The Guild has pending applications with several foundations who would provide support for local participants in 2 specific geographic areas, Northeast Ohio and the New York City area. So if you're an applicant from one of those 2 areas, you are automatically considered for that support if it should come through. But we encourage you to submit a financial aid application as well. And again, I should just say, if you know of a funder in your area who might consider working with the Guild to support CAELI participation from your area, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We would be happy to hear from you. But again, I think in terms of getting the support of your organization, you know, we encourage you to use the stories that were shared with you today. Again, a recording of this webinar will be made available by the end of the week. And so I think stories are a wonderful way to share sort of what the potential impacts of this program might be for you, your organization, et cetera. And also feel free to talk with us. We're happy to talk with you after this webinar about whether or not this program is the right fit for you at this time in your own journey. So here you can see the information for James Horton, our Director of Learning and Digital Media. And certainly, if you have more questions about the program and other services provided by Partners in Performance, please feel free to contact John McCann at the email address provided there. I should note that CAELI, we are very, very lucky that CAELI is sponsored by American Express Foundation and others, and American Express Foundation's support really does help us heavily subsidize the cost of participating in this program, and so we are, you know, we are very thankful to them as well for their support. John and James, that's all I had on the nitty-gritty, so I'm not sure if some additional questions have come up in regards to the application process, or there's other things we might have time to answer here. I know we are at the end of our hour.
What I would say, Heather, is anybody, I would like to reinforce what you said. Please, for goodness sakes, just drop me an email if there's any question you might have about the program or just want to compare notes on where you are in your own work these days and whether or not the program might be a fit. Just drop me an email. I'd really be excited to have those discussions with you.
Great. Well, I think we do need to wrap up. We want to be mindful of everybody's time. And so James has been, I know if there have been some other questions that have come in, we'll do our best to follow up with you. And as John said, please feel free to contact us during this process. John, thank you for facilitating today's orientation webinar and filling us in on some of the details of the program. And again, a big thank you to Jose and Sue and Magda for sharing your stories with us. We really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for joining us and for your interest in this fantastic program. We look forward to receiving your applications and to your inquiries. Have a great afternoon.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.